The morning was still young, with the sun casting soft hues of gold and orange over the open highway. For Malcolm Turner, a retired U.S. Army general, this drive was more than just a way to pass the time, it was a ritual. At 53, he found solace in the hum of his sturdy SUV as it cruised down the road, carrying not just him, but a lifetime of memories strapped in the back seat. Malcolm glanced briefly at the heavy steel safe secured behind him. To the untrained eye, it was just an oversized box. But for Malcolm, it was a vault of his life's treasures, medals from decades of service, personal documents, and family heirlooms passed down for generations. It wasn't just locked, it was fortified, equipped with an advanced security system. If anyone dared to tamper with it, they'd find themselves marked, literally. A spray of industrial-grade green paint would erupt, making sure the intruder's mistake wouldn't go unnoticed. Malcolm had installed it as a precaution, never imagining it might actually be triggered. The road was quiet, the kind of quiet that soothed Malcolm's restless mind. After years of service, he appreciated moments like these, just him, the open road, and his thoughts. But that peace was shattered by the piercing sound of a siren. Red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror, and a sinking feeling settled in his gut. Malcolm sighed deeply, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He hadn't been speeding, hadn't broken any laws. Yet, here he was, being pulled over. He guided the SUV to the shoulder, the crunch of gravel under his tires breaking the silence. The patrol car stopped behind him, and out stepped a stocky officer in his late 40s with a scowl that seemed permanently etched onto his face. His badge read Sergeant Carl Henderson. Henderson approached the driver's window, his eyes narrowing as they zeroed in on the safe in the back seat. His lips curled into a smirk, and Malcolm instantly recognized the type, an officer who thrived on asserting authority. No matter the cost. "Morning, sir," Henderson said, his tone dripping with feigned politeness. "That's an interesting piece of cargo you've got there. Mind telling me what's inside?" Malcolm rolled the window down just enough to respond, his voice calm but firm. "Good morning, officer. It's personal belongings. Nothing illegal, I assure you." Henderson raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Personal belongings in a safe? On your back seat? That's a little unusual, don't you think?" "Unusual doesn't make it illegal," Malcolm replied, his patience already wearing thin. He had dealt with worse during his time in the army. But something about Henderson's demeanor set his nerves on edge. Henderson leaned closer, his smirk widening. "How about you open it up for me? Just to make sure there's nothing dangerous in there." Malcolm's jaw tightened, but his tone remained even. "I'm sorry, officer, but I'm not opening anything. There's no probable cause, and I'm within my rights to refuse." Henderson's smirk disappeared, replaced by a scowl. He straightened, crossing his arms as though preparing for a showdown. "Now listen here," he said, his voice growing more aggressive. "I've seen a lot of strange things on this highway, but a safe riding shotgun, that's got suspicion written all over it." Malcolm exhaled slowly, his composure unshaken. "I'm not breaking any laws, Sergeant. If you have a reason to detain me, say so. Otherwise, I'd like to be on my way." The air grew thick with tension. Henderson's eyes flicked back to the safe, his mind clearly working through some self-justified scenario. Without another word, he strode toward the back passenger door. "All right, let's see what's so important you can't let me take a peek," he declared, reaching for the door handle. Malcolm was out of the driver's seat in an instant. Years of military training kicked in as he stepped between Henderson and the door. His voice was low, steady, and commanding. "Don't touch it. That's my property. You have no right." For a moment, Henderson hesitated, his face betraying a flicker of uncertainty. But then, his expression hardened. He sneered, stepping back toward his patrol car. "If you're going to make this difficult, I'll just handle it myself." Malcolm watched as Henderson retrieved a crowbar from the trunk of his cruiser. The officer twirled it in his hand like a trophy, strutting back with misplaced confidence. "Look, you're refusing to cooperate, and I've got a job to do. So, let's just say this is happening whether you like it or not." Malcolm didn't move. His voice was calm but carried a warning. "You're making a mistake, Sergeant. A big one." Henderson ignored him. He wedged the crowbar under the edge of the safe's door, grunting as he applied pressure. And then, it happened. A faint hiss filled the air, followed by a sharp burst. Bright green paint exploded from the safe, hitting Henderson square in the face. The force sent him stumbling backward, the crowbar clattering to the ground. The paint spread across his uniform, his face, and his hands, transforming him into a walking neon traffic cone. "What the?" Henderson roared, flailing his arms as though he could shake off the paint. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. Malcolm stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. An almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "I warned you," he said, his tone as dry as the desert. "That safe has a security system. You didn't want to listen." Henderson wiped at his face, but the paint only smeared further, clinging stubbornly to his skin and uniform. "This is assault," he sputtered, pointing a trembling, paint-covered finger at Malcolm. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "No, Sergeant, that's a safety feature, fully legal and registered." Before Henderson could respond, Malcolm pulled out his phone and held it up. "Just so you know, I've been recording this whole time. For my safety, of course." Henderson froze, his paint-smeared jaw hanging open, the smugness drained from his face, replaced by panic as he realized just how bad this looked. Malcolm's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Anything else, Sergeant, or are we done here?" The quiet stretch of highway had transformed into a surreal spectacle. Sergeant Carl Henderson, now glowing in a bright neon green hue, stood frozen, his paint-smeared hands hovering awkwardly in the air. The smug authority he carried minutes earlier had evaporated, leaving a mix of rage and humiliation on his face. Malcolm Turner, composed as ever, leaned casually against his SUV, the faintest hint of a smirk playing on his lips. The phone in Malcolm's hand was both a shield and a sword, a record of every word, every misstep, and every injustice of the past 10 minutes. The surreal silence was broken by the faint crunch of gravel. Another vehicle approached, a blue sedan slowing to a halt a few yards away. A curious man in his 30s stepped out, smartphone in hand, already recording. "Everything okay here?" the man called out, his voice tinged with a mix of concern and amusement. He squinted at the bizarre sight before him, his camera capturing every detail: the stoic Malcolm, the dripping green Henderson, and the paint-splattered patrol car. "Looks like you've been to a paintball match and lost." Henderson's eyes widened with fresh panic. "Sir, this is official police business," he barked, his voice cracking as he attempted to regain some semblance of authority. "Step back and stop recording." The man smirked, unfazed. "Official business? Huh, looks more like a bad prank show. Mind if I keep recording?" "You know, for transparency." "Feel free," Malcolm interjected, stepping slightly to the side to give the camera a clear view of Henderson. His calm, collected demeanor only seemed to fuel the sergeant's growing desperation. Henderson shot Malcolm a venomous glare before turning his attention back to the civilian. "Sir, I'm giving you a lawful order. Stop recording and leave the scene," he shouted. Though his voice lacked conviction, the green paint glistening under the sun didn't help his case. The man chuckled. "A lawful order? I don't think so. I know my rights, officer, and from where I'm standing, this looks like public interest." Henderson muttered something under his breath, his frustration palpable. With his options dwindling, he stormed back to his patrol car, leaving a trail of green footprints in his wake. He grabbed a canister of water from the trunk and began furiously splashing it on his face. The effort was futile. The paint clung stubbornly, spreading further with every attempt to scrub it off. "Why won't this come off?" he bellowed, his voice a mix of rage and despair. His frantic movements only made him look more absurd, a caricature of authority undone by his own hubris. Malcolm watched the scene unfold, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "That's the thing about industrial-grade security systems," he said finally, his tone calm, almost amused. "They're built to leave an impression." The civilian snorted, unable to contain his laughter. "Man, this is pure gold. You should post this on social media," he said, addressing Malcolm. "The whole world needs to see this." Henderson spun around, his paint-smeared face a mask of fury. "Don't you dare," he shouted, pointing a trembling, green-streaked finger at the man. "I'll have you both arrested for obstruction of justice." Malcolm straightened, his military posture unmistakable. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of authority. "Sergeant, I suggest you think carefully about your next move. You're already in violation of multiple protocols, not to mention the illegal search and damage to personal property." Henderson hesitated, his bravado faltering. "I was doing my job," he muttered, though the words sounded hollow, even to him. "Your job," Malcolm repeated, his tone sharp. "Your job is to uphold the law, not break it. You had no probable cause, no warrant, and no respect for basic rights. And now you're covered in paint because you let your ego get the better of you." The civilian whistled low, clearly impressed. "Damn, he's got a point, officer. You really stepped in it this time." Henderson opened his mouth to retort, but the sound of an approaching car cut him off. This time, it was an official-looking black SUV. It rolled to a stop, and out stepped a tall, middle-aged man in a crisp police captain's uniform. His sharp eyes immediately took in the chaotic scene. "Sergeant Henderson," the captain said, his tone clipped and authoritative. "What on earth is going on here?" Henderson stiffened, his paint-smeared face turning a deep shade of crimson beneath the green. "Captain Davis, I was conducting a routine traffic stop." "And routine?" Davis interrupted, his sharp gaze landing on Malcolm, who stood calmly beside his SUV. "Mr. Turner, are you all right?" Malcolm nodded, his demeanor respectful but firm. "I'm fine, Captain, but your sergeant here has overstepped his bounds in ways that I believe require immediate attention." Davis's jaw tightened as he turned back to Henderson. "Sergeant, I received a call about this incident, and I've seen the initial footage. I don't know what you were thinking, but this is unacceptable. Captain, save it," Davis snapped, holding up a hand. "You're suspended, effective immediately. Hand over your badge and firearm." Henderson's face fell, his paint-covered hands trembling as he fumbled with his badge. "But, sir, now, Sergeant," Davis barked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Henderson reluctantly complied, his movements slow and mechanical. He handed over his badge and gun. his shoulders slumping under the weight of humiliation. The captain turned to Malcolm, his tone softening. "Mr. Turner, I assure you this matter will be handled swiftly and appropriately. On behalf of the department, I apologize for what you've been subjected to." Malcolm nodded, his expression neutral. "I appreciate that, Captain. I'll also be forwarding this footage to my attorney, just to ensure everything is handled above board." "Of course," Davis replied, his tone understanding. He cast one last glance at Henderson before motioning toward the patrol car. "Sergeant, you're dismissed. I'll expect you in my office first thing tomorrow morning." Henderson muttered something unintelligible before slinking away, leaving a trail of green paint behind him. The captain watched him go, his expression a mix of disappointment and frustration. The civilian with the smartphone stepped closer, grinning. "Well, that was something. You're a legend, man," he said to Malcolm. "You took him down without even breaking a sweat." Malcolm offered a faint smile. "Sometimes, the truth is the only weapon you need." The civilian chuckled. "Still, I'd love to buy you a coffee sometime and hear more of your stories. You've got the air of someone who's seen a lot." Malcolm shrugged. "Maybe, but today, I think I'll just enjoy the quiet." As the man nodded and walked away, Malcolm climbed back into his SUV. He took a deep breath, letting the weight of the morning lift. The road stretched ahead, quiet and open, just the way he liked it. And as he drove off, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Justice had been served, and for now, that was enough. The next morning, the town's social media feeds were buzzing with activity. The video of Sergeant Carl Henderson's neon green debacle had gone viral overnight. Captured from multiple angles, Malcolm Turner's steady phone footage, the civilians' playful commentary, and a few passing cars that had paused to document the scene. The story had taken on a life of its own. Memes, hashtags, and headlines lit up the internet, with captions like, "Painted in Pride," "Sergeant Green Bean," and, "The Day Justice Turned Neon." Malcolm sat at his kitchen table, sipping a cup of strong black coffee. His phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, but he paid them little mind. He had seen the headlines and glanced at a few of the memes, even chuckling at some. But this morning wasn't about gloating, it was about closure. The phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't another social media alert. It was a call from Captain Davis. "Good morning, Captain," Malcolm greeted, his tone neutral but polite. "Good morning, Mr. Turner," Davis replied, his voice steady but carrying an edge of tension. "I wanted to inform you that we've conducted an internal review following yesterday's incident. Sergeant Henderson has been placed on unpaid suspension, pending a formal investigation. I'll be honest, his career with this department may be over." Malcolm let the words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "Thank you for the update, Captain. I trust you'll ensure that proper measures are taken to prevent incidents like this in the future." "That's our goal," Davis said, a hint of regret in his voice. "On a personal note, I want to thank you for handling the situation with such composure. Many others would have escalated it, but you kept a cool head." Malcolm smiled faintly. "Years in the army teach you that not every battle is fought with force, Captain. Sometimes, restraint is the most powerful weapon." Davis paused, as though absorbing the weight of the statement. "Wise words, Mr. Turner. If you ever feel the need to discuss this further, or if there's anything else we can do to make amends, don't hesitate to reach out." "I appreciate that," Malcolm replied. "Have a good day, Captain." After hanging up, Malcolm sat back, letting the quiet of his home envelop him. The events of the previous day had stirred memories of battles fought and lost, of victories won, and of the lessons that shaped him into the man he was today. He had faced injustice before, though not always with the luxury of cameras and viral videos to back him up. The department's internal review was brutal. His colleagues, who had once looked up to him, or at least tolerated him, now viewed him as a cautionary tale. The memes had reached the precinct, and the locker room was abuzz with jokes about Sergeant Safety Paint. Even those who sympathized with him couldn't ignore the undeniable facts: he had overstepped his bounds. And now he was paying the price. Sitting in his captain's office, Henderson listened as Davis laid out the consequences. "Carl, this isn't just about yesterday," Davis said, his voice firm but not unkind. "There's a pattern here: complaints about your attitude, your handling of stops. Yesterday was the tipping point. And unfortunately for you, the whole world saw it." Henderson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I was just doing my job, Captain. That man, he was hiding something. I could feel it." Davis sighed, shaking his head. What he was hiding was a lifetime of achievements. "Carl, that man is a retired general, a decorated war hero, and you treated him like a criminal because of a gut feeling. Do you realize how that reflects on all of us?" Henderson said nothing, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I'm giving you two options," Davis continued. "You can resign voluntarily, or you can face a formal disciplinary hearing. Either way, your time here is over." Henderson swallowed hard, the weight of his actions settling heavily on his shoulders. "I'll resign," he muttered, his voice barely audible. The envelope was plain, with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting hurried and uneven. "Mr. Turner, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to apologize. I was wrong, and I see that now. The paint was the least of my consequences. The real punishment is knowing I let my pride and prejudice blind me to the truth. I've stepped down from my position. I'm taking time to reflect on my actions and figure out how to move forward. Thank you for not escalating the situation. You could have destroyed me completely. But instead, you let me learn a hard lesson. Carl Henderson." Malcolm folded the letter carefully. Setting it aside, he didn't feel triumph, only a quiet sense of satisfaction that justice had been served and perhaps a life had been changed for the better. The SUV hummed along smoothly, the heavy safe still secured in the back seat. This time, though, the drive felt different. There was no shadow of the past lingering over him, no tension in his shoulders. The road was his, a symbol of freedom and the peace he had fought so hard to protect. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Malcolm reflected on the lessons of the past few weeks. Justice wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was as simple as standing firm, speaking truth, and letting the chips fall where they may. For Carl Henderson, it was a chance to start anew. For Malcolm, it was a reminder of the power of dignity and restraint. And for everyone who witnessed the story, online or in person, it was a lesson in humility, integrity, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Malcolm smiled to himself, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a promise of new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, Malcolm felt truly free. In the end, Malcolm Turner's calm resilience served as a powerful reminder of the values that truly matter: integrity, patience, and respect for others. He didn't need to raise his voice or use force to make his point. Instead, he allowed the truth to speak for itself. Through his composure and unwavering sense of justice, Malcolm taught an important lesson: that dignity and self-control can dismantle even the most aggressive displays of authority. As for Sergeant Henderson, his fall from grace was a stark warning of what happens when pride and prejudice go unchecked. His story is a call to those in power to wield their authority responsibly and with humility. Justice may sometimes feel slow, but as this tale demonstrates, it has a way of prevailing when people stand firm in their rights. This story isn't just about one man's triumph or another man's downfall. It's a reminder for all of us to treat others with respect and fairness. No matter their background, status, or circumstances. In today's world, it's easy to let impatience, bias, or ego dictate our actions. But the true mark of strength lies in understanding, empathy, and doing what's right, even when no one is watching. Let this story inspire you to lead with kindness, respect the rights of others, and remember that justice is not just a concept, it's a responsibility we all share. Whether in America, Europe, or anywhere in the world, these values transcend cultures and borders. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more captivating tales like it, make sure to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated with the latest and most inspiring content we have to offer, all for free. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue sharing stories that entertain, educate, and inspire. So, don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to be the first to know when a new story drops. Thank you for watching, and remember, the best stories are yet to come.